So no Abby yet, is that correct? No Nathan B, Nathan Bray. Gracie. Sylvia. Carlos. No Renee yet? Isaiah. Ryan Romano. No Xander. All righty, well, we'll get started. Happy Wednesday to you. Just a couple of things to remember, those of you who corrected me on the dates with the latest information, that is correct. So sophomores and juniors, if they choose to, will come back to campus Tuesday, May 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st if they choose to. So that would give you 2 weeks at school before Wellness Week and finals. Remember that if you do choose to come back, you're in class for 80 minutes. There'll be no leaving early. Like when we finish here and you're done, you leave. And then in this classroom, there's no cell phones. So there's a cell phone holder and you'll be putting that cell phone of yours into the holder when you come to class so that you have all the information to make a decision, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter to me. Happy to see faces. My phone rang inside my classroom for the first time, my classroom phone for the first time this year. Nearly jumped. Forgot what it sounded like. Plus they gave us new phones, which is kind of weird. Anyway, but we'll keep you updated if anything changes, but I doubt it. Positivity rates are still going down. Everything looks pretty good, so we should be set. As I said, we will finish the Battle of Pacific today. Next week, we're looking at the end of World War II. So the end of the war in Europe, the end of the war in Asia and the Pacific theater. The week after that, probably the week of the 17th, I believe that is, we'll cover the 1960s. The week of the 24th, we'll probably cover famous assassinations or assassination attempts throughout the time period we've studied. Then we'll look at making up anything that you've missed the week of the 31st. Remember that Monday you have off because it's Memorial Day. If you have everything turned in, you'll probably be allowed to take a version of the final that week so that you don't have to do anything but check in the next week. But we're still waiting on word for that. So in your Canvas Module 16, go ahead and click on the Battle at Guadalcanal. We'll review what we talked about yesterday with Pearl Harbor and the Battle of Midway. Today we'll look at two turning points. The first major battle of the Pacific after sort of the attack on Pearl Harbor, which is Guadalcanal. And then we'll look at the first major battle on a Japanese home island, which is Iwo Jima. And that is the famous picture of the Americans raising the American flag on that island. And I think, as ironic and sad as it is, I think half of those guys get killed later in that battle. So kind of interesting little tidbit there in terms of what happens. So Guadalcanal, and I will bring up, let me bring up the map here of the location so you can sort of see where this is at. It is part of the Solomon Islands. And the Solomon Islands, obviously a U.S. Territory. But let me give you a view of where this is at so you can see what we're talking about. So you can see what had happened during this Battle of the Pacific. The Japanese had sent aircraft carriers, and you can see Hawaii is almost halfway across the Pacific. It's about 5 hours from the US mainland. It's about 6 hours right over here to Asia. But basically what the Japanese did when they surprise attacked Pearl Harbor was they sent a fleet here on the north side, and that allowed them to come to Oahu, which is right there. The big island is Hilo. That's not where Honolulu's at. So anyway, but basically what the Japanese had done is they had pushed their way south, and we were worried that they were going to come here to Australia or to New Zealand and take over those areas. And so that's why it became very important to sort of stem the tide here and then begin to push them back towards the island of Japan. And again, as I said, we will use the strategy of island hopping, bypassing a number of Japanese strongholds on insignificant military strategy-wise islands that they control. And so this here, let me open this up for you. Okay. So when we talk about Guadalcanal, that gives you an idea about where it is at. The battle lasted almost 6 months, and it was called Operation Watchtower. So you can see the Solomon Islands, and Guadalcanal was one of those islands, was just north of Australia, northeast of Australia. Leading up to the battle, Japan had swept through the Philippines and the South Pacific. Now remember, the Philippines were a U.S. possession from the time of the Spanish-American War, when we were in control of Cuba, Panama, and the Philippines. The outcome is a significant American victory, and this is important because this is the first major battle that has sort of stemmed the Japanese and started them back in a retreating mode. The Japanese lost 31,000 soldiers and 38 ships in this battle. We lost 7,100 soldiers and 29 ships in terms of what is happening. And as I said, the importance of the battle, it's the first time the Japanese lost actual ground in the war, and it had a major impact on morale on both sides. And so what you'll see happen is both sides start to see the war differently. We within the United States start to see that we will prevail. The Japanese, for the first time, start to doubt themselves in terms of the battle that is taking place. So there's a number of things that go on from that war. So let me give you a sense of what that is like. Now remember, these have been digitized and colored, but this will give you an idea as to what everything was like.
Ruling month, USS Enterprise had proven her steel at the Battle of Midway. But the Big E is about to face her greatest challenge yet: invasion out of a place called Guadalcanal. The Solomon Islands are the center of shipping lanes, just 1,200 miles off the coast of Australia. The Solomons control, and the Japanese Navy has made the island of Guadalcanal the center square in the chessboard of the Pacific. August 7, 1942. They first disabled the enemy airstrike. The Japanese base is not prepared for invasion. Minutes later, U.S. Marines stormed shore. By the next morning, the Marines have captured the Japanese airfield and renamed it Henderson Field. The initial invasion of Guadalcanal is a resounding success. Confident Navy brass sends Enterprise out to sea and away from action, leaving only a token fleet to support the mopping up operations. But the victory celebration is premature, and the decision to send Enterprise to sea is fateful. The enemy ship steamed down the New Georgia Sound, headed directly for the American fleet anchored off Guadalcanal. In just 32 minutes, the enemy sinks 4 heavy cruisers and badly damages a cruiser and a destroyer. What remains of the American fleet escapes out to sea. The Japanese send a massive carrier task force to land, destroy Enterprise and the other carriers, and wipe out the Marines on the island.
That was the day we got our baptism of fire.
August 24th, 1942, near the island of Guadalcanal, USS Enterprise attacks. At 4:44 p.m., a dive bomb makes a direct deck. 30 seconds later, another direct hit. Her damage control crews leap into action. A third bomb nails Enterprise. The blast punches a 10-foot hole in the flight deck. USS Enterprise is blamed out of the fight. She returns for repairs. The enemy will seize this opportunity. Friday the 13th. The Japanese forces reach Guadalcanal. The two sides pound each other in close range. Watch the epic battle unfold. It goes on for hours. Revealed the scene of an apocalypse. One of the darkest periods in the history of the U.S. Navy. But hope is just over the horizon. USS Enterprise is out of the repair docks and steaming into the fight. The first planes will head for Henderson Field and take out any Japanese ships or planes they encounter en route. Daybreak, November 15th, 1942. From the war-ravaged airstrip at Henderson Field, Bruce McGraw and his comrades from USS Enterprise head off in search of 4 surviving enemy transports. The 4 Japanese transports are busy unloading supplies and reinforcements. The Wildcats strafed the transports featuring heavy 50-caliber machine guns. One by one, the 4 transports and their cargoes of troops and supplies are set up in flames and torn by machine gun fire. After more than 3 months of horrific combat, U.S. forces have finally tipped the scale in Guadalcanal. Henderson Field belongs to the Marines.
We all were very happy. Very, very happy. That's a long battle. We lost about 2 men. A lot of my friends here got hurt.
For the Japanese, defeat in the November clash destroys any hope of victory at Guadalcanal. Throughout the winter, American forces will continue to eliminate the last of the enemy troops still dug in on the island. USS Enterprise had proven her steel at the Battle of Midway.
So what you'll have happen and what this causes, just because of the brutality of the fighting, is the U.S. employs a strategy that's called island hopping. And so what they'll do is once they take control of this, right, they have now control of the shipping lanes. And as you can see, you have a set of islands. Guam is a U.S. possession as well. And we will make our way up this chain of islands, right, until we get to the Japanese mainland. And that is when the decisions, right, in terms of what is happening has to be made. So let me put this back on so you can see it. Right, just so you have an idea here of what we're talking about. So this is 42 into 43, right? And the war's not going to be over until August of 45. So it's going to take 2 years. And as I said, what happens is we employ a strategy that's called island hopping. And so we will basically go from island group that we think is important to island group to take control, right? And basically make our way up to here. Because the Japanese, the reason it takes 5 or 6 months on such a small island as Guadalcanal is that the Japanese basically dig in and they don't surrender. So they fight to the death no matter what. There's not going to be any prisoners of war. So you can see how small this island is compared to larger islands, right? But what happens is you have to clear the entire island. And you can see the distance here from Pearl Harbor to here and the distance up to Japan. So that's sort of what you're looking at in terms of the first major battle of the Pacific. We win, changes the sort of the trajectory of the war. And what we do now is start our move to Japan's main islands, right? To Japan's main islands. So when we decide, right, which islands to look at, then we need to decide what we're going to do in terms of a strategy. And so the strategy that we come up with is going to be island hopping. And so we are going to hop from island to island. Let me bring this up here for you as well. Takes just a second to open it. Hold on here just a second. There we go. Okay, so you should be able to see this on here. Okay, so this is the first battle to take place on Japanese homeland, right? The island of Iwo Jima is a strategic location with an airstrip right in the middle. The U.S. needed a place for fighter planes and bombers to take off and land when attacking the major islands of Japan, Tokyo, all of their major cities, right? Here's a picture of the soldiers storming the beach. You can see, similar to D-Day in Europe, you're going to have a number of deaths. Iwo Jima is a small island located 750 miles south of Tokyo. The island's only 8 square miles in size. It's mostly flat except for a mountain located on the southern end of the island. U.S. Marines first landed on the island in February of '45. It took over a month of furious fighting for the U.S. to finally capture the island. Flamethrowers were used to basically incinerate Japanese soldiers in the tunnels. The Japanese had dug all sorts of tunnels and hiding places all over the island to try to hide and then sabotage. There is a picture of the flag when it's first raised, right? The raising the flag of the United States after 36 days of brutal fighting, the U.S. placed a flag on top of Mount Suribachi. When they raised the flag, a picture was taken by photographer Joe Rosenthal, who was a famous World War II photographer. As I said, out of this group of men here, generally more or less, half of them don't make it off the island. The Japanese had many more deaths because the Japanese decided to fight till the end. Out of the 18,000 Japanese soldiers, only 216 were taken prisoner. The rest died in battle. That was compared to 1,600 or 6,800 soldiers on the U.S. side that died. The Japanese dug 11 miles of tunnels on an 8 square mile island. All right, so it was extremely brutal fighting. And this is one of the reasons that when Truman becomes president after Roosevelt's death, that basically they decide against an invasion of Japan and decide to use the atomic bomb. Okay. So to get a sense at how brutal this fight was, even that far away from Japan, right, there is Iwo Jima, all right, almost directly due south of Tokyo. And then, as they said, it's an extremely small island, right? Essentially, it's got an airstrip, and that's about it, right? And at the time, that's what you would see. This is a satellite view of the island if you want to see. This was the airstrip here. And then you have a mountain there. But as was said, you're looking at having to go from island to island, basically, in the invasion of Japan. So that was going to be the issue in terms of fighting. And that's why they did not want a land invasion of Japan to force them to surrender like we did with Hitler and the Nazis, because you're going to run into this type of disaster that hundreds of thousands of soldiers are going to fight to the death, and we're losing about a third of the soldiers that they have. Right? This is a little look at Iwo Jima from a Marine that was there.
I'm curator of national and military collections at Moving and Inclusive Collection at the University of South Carolina. Since 2015, we have entered into a partnership with the History Division of the United States Marine Corps, digitizing over 10,000 films from the History Division's film library. And today we're going to look at a few of the films that have recently been digitized. These are films that were shot on Iwo Jima in February and March of 1945. William Gnaus was not a young man when he rode into combat in February 1945. He was 38, going on 39. Throughout this sequence, we'll see what Bill Gnaus saw on reels 4, 5, 6, and 7 of his 16mm camera. So while Gnaus is sitting on a landing vehicle track, which is that LVT, that vessel that we see the Marines in and that the camera is in with the kind of tank treads running, we can see the naval vessels kind of bombarding the shoreline in the island of Iwo Jima. They're trying to do a lot of things. They're trying to eliminate very specific installations that they know about, and they're also trying to destroy as many Japanese that are based on the coastline that the Marines are not ready to land on. Mount Suribachi is an important target because it has large naval guns. From the shore, like any other Marines around them, is digging deeply into the soil to protect himself from shrapnel.
Those devices they were carrying were the flamethrowers. They'll use the flamethrowers to clear out the tunnels.
And he will spend some time here on the beach filming successive waves as they land and the attempts of Marines to kind of move off of the shoreline and to kind of move across the island. Landing on the Green Beach. At this stage, Gnaus was filmed for almost 2 weeks. The 28 Marines with the division of the has been fighting have been doing significant casualties as they work their way up the west coast of the island. The opening of that sequence, Gnaus is focused on the boots of dead Marines, and it's hard not to see that as a sense of weariness on the part of the cameraman, and it's difficult to see a lot of death. Probably on the third, D+12 was filming what is this provisional rocket brigade. The Marines here were deploying what was still a fairly kind of novel weapon from the Marine Corps, which were these mobile rocket launchers. They became very effective in combat, but they were also something that drew a lot of fire from the Japanese when they were used, and so Marines tried to avoid them once they started to shoot. The Gnaus footage from March 3rd transitions to footage shot by Corporal Atlee Tracy, who is somebody that was clearly a friend of Gnaus, but this is his work filming assault were using flamethrower tanks. They were called Zippo tanks. The Japanese fought principally from bunkers and caves and other positions that were well entrenched and engineered below ground. Francis Cockle of the 5th Marine Division was a combat cameraman assigned initially to work with the 5th Division's medical units. So Francis Cockle was here filming at the field hospital for the 5th Marine Division, which had been the first step back from the front lines for treating casualties. It doesn't begin with the slate. It's probably shot by Francis Cockrell, as all the rest of the films associated with it on this particular reel all come from Francis Cockrell's camera. It's an important reel, I think, because it's shot on March 25th, and this is 35 days of combat. The 28th Marines, the 5th Division of General Navy, is already preparing to leave the island and will be gone from the island for all intents and purposes within 24 hours. Marines that are coming ashore with objects that they've picked up on the island, objects taken from the Japanese officers that they've killed in combat. Those are the swords that they have over their shoulders, sometimes are tucked in their packs, and they're picking up what matters to them in terms of their regular gear and moving on to these landing craft. And really, I mean, they're going to walk away from the island for good. This isn't like Europe where they might, schedule or even imagine that they might come back to France or come see Germany. It's probably March 21st, the day of the dedication of the 5th Division Cemetery. 5th Division all stopped by the 5th Division Cemetery. It was their last opportunity to walk in quiet amongst the graves of little young men that they knew that died on the island, knowing it's inevitable that those men would ultimately be returned to the United States and buried in other cemeteries and dispersed. This was the only time that they would all be together.
It's crazy, right? About the worst thing imaginable in terms of what you have happen. But as I said, if you look at the distance, right, this is the first attack on a Japanese island that was owned by the Japanese before the war. And you can see the distance still to go between there and the main Japanese islands, right? You see it is 700, 800 miles until we get there. That's why we employ the war strategy of island hopping. We're just going to skip over certain basic islands that have no significance militarily or would do anything for us on the way to trying to end this war. All right. So if you click on next in your module, your one assignment that you'll do after the review game is just a quick set of questions over, right, the Battle of Iwo Jima. And you can look through your notes there if you don't remember any of that. And then the next is the review game. The review game will be open every day until Monday, and then a couple of days past Monday to finish the test. So in your chat room, if you type in kahoot.it into your web address, I will bring up this review game. I'll also put the game pin in there. Game pin is 4302619. All right, so Battle of the Pacific, Pearl Harbor, Midway, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, the four that we went over, right? What day was Pearl Harbor attacked by the Japanese? December 7th, right? 1941. December 7th, 1941. Right? Why did Japan attack Pearl Harbor? Right? It was both. They wanted to continue to take over countries in Southeast Asia. They were worried about the United States attacking them and trying to stop them from their expansion. Remember, earlier in the century, we talked about what they had done in terms of Korea and China, looking for natural resources during the colonial times. What was the reaction of the United States to the attack? Right? They declared war, right? Roosevelt gives a speech to Congress the next day, right? A day that'll live in infamy, and basically declares war on Japan. What important type of naval vessel was not destroyed in the attack? And this would be the attack at Pearl Harbor. Aircraft carriers. Aircraft carriers were not destroyed in the attack. Luckily for us. About how long did the attack on Pearl Harbor last? About 6 hours. Remember, there were three different waves of attacks. Three different waves of attacks on different locations around the island of Oahu. When the ship was sunk at Pearl Harbor, over 1,000 U.S. men lost their lives. USS Arizona. USS Arizona. What day of the week did the Japanese attack? It's a Sunday, December 7th, 1941. That's why it was so early in the morning during the attack that there wasn't a lot going on. The Japanese achieved their objective of crippling the U.S. Navy and the U.S. from Southeast Asia. Is that true or false? It's false, right? The aircraft carriers weren't in the port, luckily, and we recover. And basically, from the point of Guadalcanal all the way up through Iwo Jima, we use the strategy of island hopping and basically take control of the Battle of the Pacific. What facilities in Hawaii did the Japanese not attack that led the U.S. Navy to recover quickly? Right? Repair facilities. Repair facilities, right? And that makes logical sense. Recover quickly because the repair facilities weren't taken out and they could just repair those boats and get them right back out, obviously, except for the USS Arizona. What is the name of the memorial of the attack? Right, so USS Arizona. Now I can show you an overhead look of that. The boat is still submerged. All the bodies were left there. What two nations fought at the Battle of Guadalcanal? United States and Japan. During what war did the Battle of Guadalcanal take place? World War II. Right, where is the island of Guadalcanal located? It's in the South Pacific, just northeast of the continent of Australia. All right, which of the following best describes the situation prior to the battle? All of those are true, right? The Japanese had control of the island of Guadalcanal. The Japanese had gained control of much of the South Pacific, and the Japanese were threatening Australia. That's why it's the turning point of the Battle of the Pacific. All of those things were true. What would the Japanese do at night during the Battle of Guadalcanal? They would send in more troops using fast boats. Right? Around how long did the Battle of Guadalcanal last? Six months. Lasted about 6 months. Right? The Battle of Guadalcanal was the first time the Japanese had lost ground during the war. Is that true or false? That's true. What was the code name for the initial invasion of the island by the United States? Operation Watchtower. Operation Watchtower. What was the final outcome of the Battle of Guadalcanal? Right? United States won and took control. Right? Remember, they named it Henderson Field, that airstrip. Where is the island of Midway located? It's almost halfway between the continents of North America and Asia. Around how long did the Battle of Midway last? Good day. 4 days. 4 days. Japan lost over almost Well, actually, they did. They lost just over half of their aircraft carriers and were never able to sustain again. What gave the United States an edge in preparing for the battle? U.S. codebreakers had intercepted Japanese transmissions. Remember, right, the first satellite ever launched by any country is in the 1950s with Sputnik and the Soviet Union. They're right, and so that automatically knocks those two ties out. All right, what United States aircraft carrier was sunk at the Battle of Midway? Right, Yorktown is what is sunk. Yorktown is sunk. What was the outcome of the Battle of Midway? Right, U.S. won, destroying 4 of Japan's aircraft carriers. And they're never the same. They're never able to, superiority-wise, challenge us in the Navy. What is the Island of Midway today? It's territory of the United States. What is Iwo Jima? Right? It's a small island, right? And it's the first one that the United States takes control of that was part of Japan. How long did the U.S. generals think it would take to win the Battle of Iwo Jima? One week. They thought it would take 1 week. Right? And in reality, how long did it take to get Iwo Jima? 36 days, just over a month. Generals thought it would take 7, took 36. All right, what happened when the first Marines landed on the shore of Iwo Jima? Right? They weren't attacked at first. They thought the Japanese weren't there or they were already dead from all of the bombing and shelling from the ships offshore. How did the Japanese use the many tunnels they had dug around the island? All of those are true. Kept them safe from the shelling of the ships of the United States, right? Lobbing projectiles from out at the ocean. They were able to sneak up behind US soldiers, right? And they were able to move around the island without being detected and could re-fortify different areas. What photographer took the famous picture of the Marines raising the flag at Iwo Jima? They talked and they showed 6 reels of his. Good. Joe Rosenthal. Joe Rosenthal, very famous. True or false, most of the Japanese soldiers were taken prisoner after they surrendered. It's false, right? Most of them died. They would not allow themselves to be taken prisoner. How many US soldiers died in the Battle Iwo Jima? It was about 1/3 the number of Japanese. $6,800. 6,800 on an island that was 8 square miles. How many Japanese soldiers died in the battle? $18,900. All right, how many atomic weapons did the US drop in Japan in World War II? There you go. Okay, so something I want you to think about, right? When we talk about Iwo Jima, right? Generals thought it would take 7 days to take this island. It ended up taking 36. This is one of the big reasons why we decide, right? You've got 800 miles between there and Japan, right? And I talked about the size of this island, 8 square miles, all right? When you see this, what you need to understand, the city of Santa Maria is nearly 24 square miles. The city of Santa Maria is 3 times the size of this island. And it took 36 days, all right, to capture this one island. So that's why, right, we island hop, skip islands that aren't as important, right, in terms of refueling strategy, etc. And that's why serious consideration is given to dropping the atomic weapons once it becomes known that that weapon will work, because it'll save anywhere from 250,000 upwards of 2 million American lives in this battle. All right, now this review game, as I said, is available to you for a few days past. The test, which will show up Monday as a missing assignment in Aries, you should have enough time. I think these are 10 questions, multiple choice. You should have time to finish that before class is done. And then all you have to do is practice the review game before you take the exam. The exam, as I said, is available as soon as this class is over. So at 3:11, this test will be open and available. On the left-hand side, as usual, it'll have the 35 questions in the test packet. On the right is where you'll put your answers, right? There's 35 questions on the test, 35 review questions on the Kahoot, all right? So that'll be available to you as soon as 3:11. All right, if you have any questions or concerns, you can stick around. Otherwise, we will see you next Monday.